You guys can hear me with this? Are we on? How about now?
Can you check that one? They turn off. They have a standby. Go ahead, check.
Mic check. That sounds good. All right. How's everybody doing today? We've got all of our high horse crew here in the house. We've got our online community over here that may see this now or in the future. So guys, we're going to give, a general overview here of how to think about cannabis when it comes to seniors. So I want to start, the presentation for today as probably the easiest senior relationship for you guys to imagine, which may be, your grandparents or your aging parents at this point. So I want you to start with that context of imagining, your aging family members going through whatever it is that they go through throughout their, through their aging process. And, thinking about that and cannabis use in seniors for, you guys as bud tenders, as cannabis industry people, there's a lot there to consider and to digest as far as, really implanting yourself into someone who is aging that's coming up to a dispensary or even catching you in the community, asking you for knowledge and education regarding cannabis. So it's important to get that empathy and that perspective and really be able to see that. What are, seniors using cannabis for? What are the trends? What are they going to be asking? Maybe not much of us that are middle-aged watch a lot of mainstream media, but, recently CNN, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, he's been doing, I guess, documentaries over the last 10 years or so on cannabis, but, he had just pushed out his Cannabis for Seniors documentary, and he goes through it. And, he talks about this senior who had a funny experience going to the ER. He alludes to the trillions of dollars that the United States is paying every year in healthcare, being north of 500 billion of that money is spent on pharmaceutical costs. So I think as a pharmacist, yes, it's absolutely important to make sure that we are all fully aware of the impact that cannabis can have in our senior population, what that really may mean, and where seniors may be coming from when they come to the dispensary counter or wherever that may be that they're looking for knowledge. So facts from here: cannabis use has increased adults, all Americans age 65 and older, 0.4% in 2008 to 2.9% in 2016. So this was long before where we're at now. And obviously now us as a border area, us as a legally recreationalized state since 2021, we have more seniors using it than 2.9%, and obviously more curious about it. So we'll get into it a little later and kind of talk about scenarios, guys, with the different types of traffic that we see here with our patients, and the battles our seniors face, whether it's starting at home with mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, uncle, or really out on the sales floor and how those conversations may be having or affected, right? So looking at the traditional comparison, guys, just to relate it to you guys, you see that, $580 billion of pharmaceutical drugs being spent on. Opiates are a huge part of that drug spend. Opiates are physically addictive, and we all know these things, but there is so much room for the potential of therapeutic advancement for cannabis here, and something to continue to stress to all our patients. Opiate use causes even more rises in fall risk for seniors. What are the things that seniors get affected by with aging? Just ambulation, like seniors are not able to walk properly. Hips and all these joints may become very fragile and brittle. And, cannabis can have some inflammatory effects here that can be positive without having to cause an opiate response. When, seniors are taking benzodiazepines that are furthering their drowsiness, that are increasing dementia, there's, things that we are hopefully promisingly cannabis can maybe even prevent. There's neuroprotective properties of cannabis. And when you look at cannabis use in Alzheimer's and some of these things, obviously there's no data there, but you're curious about how CBD or how THC may have inflammatory effects. They're regulating the brain. You're looking at homeostasis within the body. Homeostasis as you age starts to decline, and it continues to decline. So where you can help adults and seniors really prevent these poor outcomes that are associated with cannabis, meaning falling or medication interaction, which we can talk about. And you guys, a lot of our room in here right now, knows a lot of the cannabis knowledge. So for those of you guys that are online and catching this too in the future or any other time, we're looking endocannabinoid system, 6 major organ system. You got CB1 and CB2 receptors up in the brain and spine and gut. Cannabis actually works with opiates to help pain control. So there's a lot of promise in terms of, weaning down the opiate doses for the opiate addicted, or for seniors who are just truly, managing their chronic pain with opiates, and they are at way too high of like a morphine equivalent. And, seniors may not even think about the layering of medications that they take that could increase things like their fall risk. I talked to somebody and had a cannabis consultation with a senior, and she had some sort of back spasm going on. And, a lot of these times, these are lifelong problems. And by the time you end up going back to the doctor after so long, after you're old, when you're older, you learn to deal with things. That's how, a lot of these seniors have really gotten by. They can definitely deal with things. So by the time that we, engage with them, a lot of the times they've really dealt with some stuff. So this lady, she had, all kinds of lower and all kinds of issues going on, spasms, and she goes into urgent care. She got like a 3-day dose exactly of a muscle relaxer. And it was a heavy dose of this muscle relaxer. And so her and her daughter had came in asking, about her medications and cannabis and this, that, and the other. And she had a black eye, and, she was beat up. And we're sitting in there talking about cannabis. And, we were looking at the chief complaint of, well, what's going on, this, that, and the other. And we really got down to the fact of that she was on a muscle relaxer. She had just been prescribed a muscle relaxer, goes out in the yard, falls on her face because she's OD'd basically on the muscle relaxer. Old people take longer to clear medications. It takes longer for their body to metabolize them, whether, liver, kidneys, however it's going out. And a lot of the times, their kidney function is compromised, leading to higher increases of medication within their system. And it takes longer to clear. Cannabis sure can have influence on the way some of these medications do stay in the body. However, it's just as significant to be aware of the fact that your aging patient may be coming to the dispensary and just being on a plethora of medications. What does that even really, look like? What sort of cocktails and layers of things could they be on may be dangerous, and where, cannabis, as promising as it really could be for them, could it increase their fall risk if they were using THC or even, too high of a dose of CBD with some of these other things? And, as we look at the medication considerations and some of these things, granted, we don't have all this 100% knowledge, and patients, incur that risk themselves. Old people, a lot of the time, have, blood pressure issues. A lot of old people cannot take ibuprofen or any NSAIDs because it'll blow up their kidneys. So it's just different metabolism to think about, but at the same time, it's, some of the most dire need for the actual people that really are in, as a general population, really who could benefit from cannabis. So looking at things that help us create a more responsible approach. Everybody knows dosing. I think in here, you guys get it start low and going slow, helping people identify where to use, what they might use THC for, what they might use CBD for, how they may use it together, how to prevent some of these ER effects, ER from a bad trip, quote unquote, as Sanjay Gupta's article, or Sanjay Gupta's, his documentary cited there. Ken had the bad trip and he went out, he wanted to prevent that. He was, playful about it. However, can you mitigate the effects of THC? Yes, with CBD, right? And we can educate our community on those things. We can educate our seniors about, going too far when it goes to dosing, what to possibly be afraid of, what to not be afraid of. Guys, there's actually a really cool example in the state of New York. And I wanted to highlight these guys. So it's called the Hebrew Home at Riverdale. And they actually literally came up with a medical marijuana program in their nursing home. And I think this is a cool model that, someday that hopefully we can push for here in New Mexico or Las Cruces. They had ways to help, adults access their medications. If you guys, I would assume that you guys are aware, but, in most nursing homes here in New Mexico, it's definitely not allowed because those nursing homes are either federally funded or connected in some other way. It's not in the policies to keep it on site. It's federally, still illegal. It's a Schedule I controlled substance, no approved medical use. So that's how they categorize that. And, this Hebrew home up in New York, they were literally one of the first people to start doing this. And adults were using it with cancer treatment and just their regular symptoms of aging. Adults keep wine in the nursing homes. They can keep a little bit of amount of stuff like that. I remember being on a rotation up at the TRC veterans home up there. And, the care that goes into that home is probably underserved. You know what I mean? Just like our rural communities out here in New Mexico, just like, oftentimes right now in the heat and all these other things, or what sort of other conditions the cold may bring and affect seasonal changes in, the geriatric community. So, guess being mindful of the time and the place and the things that seniors are going through as they age, creates even more of an awareness in a situation as you do recommend and as you create those relationships with your senior population and your community, guys. Do you guys know what most blood thinners are? Do you guys know what blood thinner medications are? Is my general medical question. So being aware of blood thinners when it comes to medication interactions in the geriatric population, just keep that in mind. Granted, obviously, you guys probably know that, don't want to go out there and give medical advice, but if adults are on medication, it's good to ask them those questions, especially if they're a first-time purchaser, if they, don't know a lot. Encourage them to, obviously talk to myself or whatever we may have it, but talk to their doctor to make sure that they make the right decisions and, really incur that trust between, you and your patients, because it really may be an exploratory process for them to have to balance these things. And it's a hard experience. People are living oftentimes on disability or retirement. They're not the working age of people. So to help them, not feel so preyed upon, our senior population definitely feels that, and to make sure that we give a welcoming experience to all of our community there. I think, transparency is, as the studies are not 100% out there supporting really a whole lot of medical use right now, just because there's not enough volume, being transparent with your seniors to let them know those kinds of things, but to let them know they can be safe. They can start low and go in slow. They can use CBD to help their THC, take down. They can use full spectrum oil. They can, even have black pepper that they keep at their house, can not snort it, but just run it like that. So if you can prepare seniors with options as what are you going to do if you have issues, hopefully you can help them explore their options, help them tap into what inner pains or struggles that they're having to deal with, where they may be able to have a little bit better of quality of life. And at that stage of life, it really does become a quality of life measure, right? You want people to be happy and healthy, and you want to try to keep inflammation down and keep them moving. And there's ways cannabis can do that. Everybody has their own different ways. You know, these geriatrics, last time for a lot of people that they did this was in the 70s. And they're coming back now with questions about, well, are these strains way, you know, more potent, or what's the difference between now and then? And maybe there's limited info there, but what you do know is dosing, and that can be consistent, and you can keep, you know, guaranteeing a consistent educational experience for our senior community. So the last thing here, guys, that I wanted to talk about here is studies showed that 32% of older adults substitute cannabis for prescription medications, and 42% stopped a pharmaceutical. So, you know, 1 out of 3 people in a general sense may be actually willing to really actually get off of a pharmaceutical, you know, medication for whatever it may be to use and substitute cannabis. That's awesome. But I also want you guys to be aware that if people are doing this, they really need to be under the guidance of their providers. So, you know, if you're going to take something off and change something, you know, being aware and helping suggest, well, talk to your doctor about that before you're like, I want to take this so I can stop taking this. You guys are like, well, I don't know what any of this is, but, well, can you be proactive and help them just maybe ask those right questions and not get a little off track to those degrees? And just in a friendly manner, I think those are some of the courtesies that you can give to your patients. Obviously, seniors are going to be asking about insomnia, pain, anxiety. These are things that we can really help look at when you're comparing and contrasting the other therapeutic, you know, suggestions, even over the counter for insomnia or anxiety. And you know, we even have patients that are still over the age of 65 that are on tramadol, synthetic opiates, that are on benzos. Right, and we're talking about fall risk again. So when we are talking about trying to get our seniors to be able to go to sleep, do we want to minimize fall risk? Absolutely. Do we want to help alleviate their pain? Absolutely. Medication management is going to be at, you know, the top of their line. Most seniors are taking medications multiple times a day, and cannabis is going to get worked in with that. So if you just have that awareness of their experience, how they are going to use this, where they might use it, I think as a community, as you know, bud tenders and a cannabis industry, we can do a very good job teaching them. So guys, for the online stream, we're not getting too much into CBD and THC really and how to use that here. Wanted to go over here real quick about cannabis and dementia, neuroprotective effects of CBD and THC. So keep that in mind. We don't want to go out there and make medical claims that, because our senior population, guys, are very vulnerable, and what they hear a lot of the times, if it's from the right person or at the right timing, you know what I mean, that's a very vulnerable population. So when you look at ads like Prevagen that are out there, you know, there's not a lot of good science that supports the jellyfish, you know, proteins to help memory. And older adults see those commercials and they're spending $80 on a bottle. So you got to be careful with the way you communicate information, and just try to be upfront and transparent to those, and it will be well received. I think that's just something to take note on for sure there. And other than that, let's break this thing off and talk a little bit about this by ourselves.